I'm still looking through games from the Tata Steel event, and I'd like to look at this round 1 game from the Challengers tournament between Hans Niemann and Liam Vrolijk. So Vrolijk is a Dutch Grandmaster, 21 years old, and well, we know who Hans Niemann is. He's the bad boy of the chess world at the moment. A couple of days ago, well, there was a statement from the St. Louis Chess Club saying that they will not be extending any tournament invitations to Hans in 2024 after apparently he caused some damage to a hotel room there at the US Championship and was rather rude to some people there as well. So, I mean, who knows? You can see online that Hans and the St. Louis Chess Club have different versions of what happened, but anyway, there seems to have been a rapid, unscheduled disassembly of a hotel room, which has caused some problems. Anyway, Hans has also quite recently announced that he's going to be doing a regular vlog, and he's going to memorize all of Bobby Fischer's games. So he's channeling the maverick American world champion, which seems to fit his personality. Anyway, let's look at this game. Round 1. I thought it was really interesting. Excellent game. And we can learn a lot from this, folks. The Giuoco Piano. The opening of the moment. Knight f6. So white can choose knight g5. This ancient continuation. Still very tricky, but d3. So we go down typical Giuoco Piano line. And we've seen recently, over the past few months, that bishop g5 is very trendy at the moment. Interestingly, Hans declines to go for it. Instead, just plays rook e1. So, in playing like this, clearly he's envisaging going with d4. a5. That obviously stops white expanding with b4 and gives the bishop an escape square. h3, so preventing the bishop coming here, and it looks highly likely if you play this that you're going for d4. Bishop e6, of course the bishop on c4 is an excellent piece and black wants to exchange it off. Niemann avoids that with bishop b5, and now there's a threat to play d4, d5, winning a piece. That's why the bishop dropped back. And knight d2. So Niemann playing in a very traditional way. He wants to spin his knight round to g3, looking at that outpost on f5, and it just clears the knight out of the way. Vrolijk plays in a similar way. He wants to put the knight on g6, and it leaves that bishop rather sort of hanging in midair. d4. There we go. Niemann presses forward in the middle. Knight g6. Defends the pawn, and now because that bishop is doing nothing on b5, it spins round bishop a4. Knight h5, black taking the initiative, so that f4 square is very inviting for one of those knights, and particularly as there's a pawn on h3, so it makes it very hard to drive this one away. I mean, this pawn is potentially vulnerable to some kind of sacrifice. So therefore knight f1, I mean, sacrifices probably aren't going to be very good when the knight is round here. But still, the knight looks very good on f4. Very typical when you've got the pawns here. g3 is unlikely because this pawn hangs. Knight g3. So, you know, white is doing a similar kind of thing. This knight could well land on f5. And black exchanges on d4 and plays d5. So looking to take the initiative, and both players playing reasonably quickly. They would, I'm sure, have known that this was played in, I think, a US Championship game. But anyway, certainly games between Caruana and Huschenbett, played in Düsseldorf 2023. And Sevian against Dominguez. I'm not quite sure where that was played. Anyway, so two well-known games. They're in the databases. And both of those games continued e5. But in both games, black was absolutely fine after f6, opening up the f file. And actually, black is very well coordinated. It's not so simple for white at all. But very quickly in this position, Niemann played bishop takes f4. So giving up one of his bishops. However, it does clear white's lines very quickly. And Niemann said after the game that he'd been looking at this line but wasn't really convinced by white's position. But a friend of his suggested this line to him. So he was still in his preparation, and you can see that by his clock times. And Vrolijk actually thought for 13 minutes here, because this is new stuff. First glance, it seems that black is okay. He exchanged on e4. Rook takes e4. This is a good move, better than knight takes, because white is looking to double on the e file, as we'll see. So the knight came back to g6. Yeah, if it goes the other way, then black has to be careful of some kind of attack with knight g5. So knight g6 here. So that leaves the d5 square available for the bishop. And bishop b3. So that's, in this case, we saw earlier how white wanted to avoid this exchange. Now it's appropriate. Otherwise, that bishop would be an absolute monster on d5. So it's funny. The position changes, and you have to change your strategy as well. Niemann said after the game that he had mainly been looking at bishop takes bishop. It seems like an obvious way for black to play, damaging these pawns. Then again, black wastes a tempo because you have to defend that pawn, well, and so on. It gets complicated. But anyway, that's an alternative. But instead of that, black played bishop d5. Okay, occupying this blockading square. So the bishop was exchanged and rook ae1. So it's very similar to that position with the double pawns, but you could say, white's structure is a little bit better. But black hasn't wasted a move playing the bishop to b6. So it's slight. Niemann said this is a little bit different from his preparation. However, he knew a lot of the key ideas. And I think this is a very interesting moment. Now, if you switch on your chess computers, you will see that the best engines basically think that black is absolutely fine here. And this whole position just doesn't offer white anything. Roughly level. But this is where strong human chess players come into their own. Because in fact, this is quite a tricky position for black. You have to play very precisely to equalize here and to get it right. So, let's look at things. What assets does white have here? Well, first of all, fantastic coordination. All white's pieces are well coordinated. They're all very efficiently placed, working well together. They don't tread on each other's toes. The rooks in particular control the open e-file. That's really important. And watch what happens if black greedily grabs a pawn on the other side of the board. Let's look at queen takes a2. That's the move we would like to play. And what's the big deal? Looks like black is very solid. After this, it's unbelievably difficult for black. So white has a very simple plan. Queen g5, h4, h5, and attack the king. We know that knights on f5 can be very powerful against the castled king. They look at these key squares. But in combination with white's other pieces, notice these rooks can't be exchanged off. So they offer real stability, and the queen has found a square here. So queen d5, queen g5. Okay, there's already a threat to play knight h6 to win the queen. All right, just for the sake of argument, let me play like this. c6, h4. This is really, really dangerous already. The queen can always step back if it's hit. Very hard to see how black actually neutralizes the pressure here. Fantastic position. So that's what black has to contend with. Black has to be very careful, actually. Rook d8. After some thought, I mean, looks reasonable to protect the queen and to put some pressure on d4. I mean, you know, black is not without chances here. h4. There we go. So white is trying to take the initiative on the king side with h5, potentially h6 as well. But I mean, you can see that this knight is really short of squares. Again, it's to do with those rooks. The knight doesn't have a safe square here. So this is already quite tricky, actually. So Vrolijk played f5. Lashes out. What do we think of that move? Well, from a human point of view, I look at that and think I slightly wince. Because it weakens these squares here. It weakens this diagonal. Now at the moment the queen is protecting that diagonal very well, but one never knows, and these squares are weakened. The computer says, good move. But that just shows you that the computer might be able to get away with it, but for a human it's tricky. Let's see. So the rook came back. Now it is possible to take the pawn on d4. But there's no need to panic there. You can just play queen c2 and white has compensation. Well, anyway, let's compare with what happened in the game. So f4. The knight hopped into e4. And now bishop takes d4. And this next move is very subtle and very, very strong. Okay, I'll have a slurp tea. You have a little think. So it's white to play here. White to play. What would you do next? That was a proper slurp. We have to be a little bit careful here. The move I'd like to play with white is knight g5. But watch out. Well, hang on. Well, first of all, I should say that that's a potential threat. But that's unfortunate. Knight takes knight. Then queen takes. So let's go back. The move that Niemann played is queen c2. It's a really subtle move and very strong because not only is he looking down the c-file, he's looking down this diagonal, and that could be really significant once a knight lands on g5. And watch out for that square. You know, I mentioned earlier that the f-pawn weakens squares on the e-file, so particularly e6. You know, this is problematic. So, for example, queen takes a2. Again, the queen is just way offside in Siberia. So, h5 here, and knight g5, looking at the bishop and looking at queen h7. I mean, absolutely crushing. You can see how strong the queen is on that diagonal. And indeed, if c6, then knight eg5, looking at knight e6, is also really strong, as well as h5 as well. So that's why h6 was played after quite a big think. And queen takes pawn. So Niemann has got his pawn back. Still has a really solid position. I think this is what's nice about white's position, is that everything is so compact. No weakness there at all. Whereas for black it's a little bit different. You know, you notice there's a loose knight here. There are lots of things lined up on the d file. could potentially be something there. And once again, queen takes a2. No, not good enough. So h5, this knight is miserably placed. And white's initiative is just way too much here. This knight hopping in here. This pawn is threatened. The rook potentially can come down here. Beautiful attack for white. So in the game, rook d7 was played. And the queen just slid back to c2. It's a really good square for the queen. It's completely safe. And yeah, it sets up all kinds of interesting threats. It looks through the knight on e4, so there's a kind of veiled attack there as well. So with so many loose pieces, this is a really difficult position for black. And Vrolijk cracked with queen c6. This was not a cheerful move. White to play. What did Niemann do next? White to play. Well, this is a white to play in win position. He simply exchanged and played rook d2, and the pin is absolutely fatal. There's no way out for black. So rook takes bishop is threatened, and if rook d8, then rook d1. If c5, it doesn't help the cause because this can be taken. Pin and win. It's really nasty. So in this position, after rook d2, black resigned. I really like that game because I think it shows what preparation is about these days. You know, it's not just about playing down computer lines that, you know, give you some big advantage. Well, it's really hard to do that. What you have to do is use the computer, yes, to check that there isn't something, you know, some horrible tactical mistake. But it's all about finding positions that are uncomfortable for a human to play. And although the position at this point objectively is about equal, according to the computers, in fact, in practice, this is actually quite tricky for black because white is so well coordinated. But as Niemann said after the game, actually, he was given this idea by a friend of his, and you know, he was very grateful for receiving that idea. Right, well, we'll follow the adventures of Hans Niemann over the next few months. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more happening as he's concerned. Just to let you know that the Weissenhaus Goat Freestyle Chess Goat Challenge, what a name, is about to take place starting on Friday. So this is taking place in the north of Germany. Magnus Carlsen is going to be playing. It's basically a Fischer Random classical tournament with just 8 players. So, you know, that is very interesting. Carlsen's playing Caruana, Ding, Firuzja, Keimer. I think it's a really exciting event. I think the problem with Fischer Random events so far is that, the top ones, is that they've all been held with a rapid time control. This is classical chess. So this will give time for the players to actually explore, you know, really creative ideas with Fischer Random. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll try and cover as many rounds as possible. I've got a busy time at the moment, but let's see how we go. Anyway, that starts on Friday. In the meantime, thanks for watching.